Hey guys, Happy New Year. The New Year just passed, as did my birthday. So happy holidays on all counts. But I wish you a very super, extremely magical 2026. And many goals and dreams come to fruition. And I hope it's your best year yet, translationally and personally. I'm in San Francisco at Hotel Julian. So Julian, if you're watching this clip, you're the happy owner of this hotel, or maybe not. But I decided that the first clip of the year is going to be about a vital, crucial, key, essential, critical topic: words and definitions. And many smart philosophers and translation experts have talked about this topic, and I have talked about this topic, but today I want to address it from a slightly different perspective. And by the way, the fact that there's a Christmas tree growing out of my head proves conclusively that I'm Santa or one of his cousins. Anyway, so the way that I want to look at words is this: take up some common words in life that tend to be emotionally charged, understood, misunderstood, and see what havoc this can wreak and how their understanding or misunderstanding can affect us all. Sometimes even the cleverest of people misunderstand words, and the effect that this has can be either silly or fatal sometimes. It brings about mistranslations, it brings about malpractice in medicine, it brings about major mix-ups like the horns of Moses and the bombs dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, look up the story. That's a very possible mistranslation. At least I believe in it. It can bring about actual stupidity or stupefying effect. Sometimes even get confused with ADD or ADHD when kids or adults don't know words. And it can bring about a manipulative effect. Like people use, that's actually why I wanted to record this clip. That was the prompt that spurred me on to record this clip, is because a certain word was used improperly, incorrectly. And I thought to myself, wow, words are so important, and they can be used for so much good, but also for so much evil. So on the good side, or on the opposite side of the coin, understanding words and using them correctly causes good translations, more intelligence, more precision, not just in translation, but in life and in understanding, and an inability to manipulate people, or an ability to guide them well by using definitions. So let's take up seven commonly used words and just quickly run through them and see how they can be misdefined or misused and so forth. And the words from the last one that I'm going to take up to the first one are responsibility, harassment, help, love, sex, and translation. Let's start with translation. So here's my definition. This is not necessarily the perfect definition, it's just what came to mind after swimming in the bay and running up and down San Francisco hills and having 3 Turkish coffee in one single day. So honestly, I didn't feel like thinking too much. But here's my definition. Translation, this applies equally to interpreting. Transferring the full concept and message of one language into another language with no or virtually no loss or alteration. The translation maintains the content, the details and facts, the intention and tone, the style and register of the original, and it reads as if written in the target language, not artificial or translated. In essence, it's creating the best possible duplicate and unrecognizable forgery of the original. I've said this before, we're all master forgers if we're masters of translation. Why did I say virtually no loss of alteration? Well, because anytime you communicate a thought, something is lost. In fact, one of the great poets of the 19th century, I believe it was the golden age of Russian poetry, or maybe slightly later. Larry, correct me on this. But Fyodor Tuchev, he said, if translated to English, a thought expressed, the truth belies. Belies means to represent incorrectly. So basically, anytime we express a thought, it isn't in words, it's not 100% expression. This is a very philosophical statement. I don't want to go off on a tangent, only on a cosine. Anyway, but now, what do people think of translation? Very often, when we're upset about translations, people do something else, right? They do word-to-word translations, or literal translations, or paraphrases, or omissions, or they think that it should be faithful to the grammar but not to the authenticity or the idiomaticity of the text. So they are not exactly using that definition. They also confuse it with transcription, transliteration, and so on and so forth. And sometimes the word interpret is confused with interpreting, as in interpreting artistically or per your own understanding. So just because the definition is not clear, and definitions carry much more punch and power than you might think. Or maybe you do fully understand the power of definitions, but sometimes a definition alone can set a person on the right tracks or disabuse them of some false idea or even a false intent. And we'll go through that. So that was my first example. Next one. Let's take an even more philosophically profound word, the word love. And I don't pretend to be an expert on love, far from it, but I definitely know that this word gets tossed around without people even understanding what it means. Actually, I'll give you an example from Outlander, the recently popular TV show. Wow, the last season actually just started in January. I'm sorry, I have to end the clip and go watch the last season. Okay, so now think about this yourself. Have you ever said I love you to somebody without really believing it or knowing what it means? I have. And in one of the seasons of Outlander, Jamie, the protagonist, has sex with a cute girl, not his wife, who kind of insists on it because she's a duchess or a countess, a noblewoman. And then she says, I love you. And he says, no, that's not love. That's just lust or passion or whatever. And she says, well, what is love? And he defines it, actually, I like the way that he defines it. He says it's when you give all of yourself to the other person and they give all of themselves to you. But very often people confuse love with passion, love with obsession, love with jealousy, love with sex, love with many other things. I looked it up, and I think this is from Merriam-Webster, and it says, affection based on admiration, benevolence, or common interests. Her love for a best friend, the coach earned the love and respect of his team. Now that's just social, platonic, whatever love. And the other definition was attraction based on sexual desire, affection and tenderness felt by lovers. And I would say when you combine the two, you get the true love, the physical attraction and the personal care. Yeah, again, not to go off on a romance tangent, but think of how many songs and books and real life stories pass for love when it is nothing but jealousy or obsession. And in fact, crimes have been perpetrated in the name of love, right? I loved her, so I killed her. Or I loved her, so I locked her up, or him, or whatever. Anyway, you get the point. Now, a corollary of this, corollary, by the way, it's good to define terms if they can be misunderstood, is in geometry, something that flows or follows from the main theorem, or maybe not just in geometry, but in mathematics. So, something that once the theorem is proven kind of follows. Anyway, sex. This is obviously also misunderstood and confused. Or maybe this isn't as much misunderstood, and I'm definitely not here to talk about the birds and the bees. And I'm sure you guys understand the word well, but I would define it as an act of procreation, one, and two, the physical manifestation of love. You love somebody and you want to show it on an affectionate, touchy basis. And again, it doesn't even have to be romantic, like you love your pet and you want to hug your pet, or you love a friend and you want to shake their hand and pat them on the back and, hug them and so forth. So that's what it is, but it's given so many definitions and misdefinitions by, I don't know, Freud, who was probably a very smart man, but nonetheless it's some impulse guided by the Loch Ness monster within us, and the Nessie and the Bessie. I don't know what is written in all of these books, but it's misdefined, I'm sure. Okay, since I'm not an expert on the subject necessarily, let's go on. Help. Now this is a very important word, and even the Beatles talked to our son about it, and this is definitely misunderstood. Very often people say, I'm going to help you, and they stop you or they harm you, intentionally or unintentionally. I'll give you 2 examples. Funny but sad. Actually, one is kind of funny but sad, and the other is just sad. The funny one is I went to this play in Russia. There was an explosion in the Russian subway, and it was a very sad day, but the theater almost canceled the play, but then they didn't. And believe it or not, but it was a play about a simultaneous interpreter. I don't know how I ended up at this play, but he gets attached to this woman, and she starts helping him, quote unquote. And every time she helps him, his life gets worse. He gets into more and more and more trouble. And finally, at the end, somehow he winds up in prison, and she comes to him and she says, I'm going to help you, dear. And he says, no, please, no, just go away. So her definition of help is to cause him more trouble, or to actually get him in more dire straits so that she can pretend she's helping him. And actually, we've all done this. None of us are angels. We've somehow harmed the person, belittled the person, offended the person so that we can later help him. You don't have to agree with me, but I'm pretty sure we've all done this. I'm no exception. The other example was, in a movie, The Young Woman in the Sea. It's about the first woman who ever swam across the English Channel. She wants to swim across the English Channel, and she wants her favorite coach to be her coach. Makes sense, right? Because they are already a team, they've accomplished something, and this team of male chauvinists, they basically say, no, my way or the highway, and this guy is going to be your coach. And this guy is somebody who has never successfully swum against the channel, across the channel. He made like 20 attempts, all of them failed. So that alone raises eyebrows. But he actually doesn't want her to succeed, because she would be the first woman who would actually surpass his accomplishment. So he tries to get in her way in every single possible way. First, he doesn't want her to use front crawl, only breaststroke. Second, he actually tries to get her to touch him when she's swimming so that she would be disqualified. And lastly, he finally poisons her with his soporific drugs, his tranquilizers. And she has to quit the attempt, and then somebody else actually helps her across. So he sabotages her in the name of help. And believe me, this happens. It's not always this bad, but sometimes people overprotect you in the name of help. But what is the true definition of help? Well, the dictionary gives one simple definition: aid another to accomplish their goal. And a slightly more expansive definition is to give or provide what is necessary to accomplish a task or satisfy a need, contribute strength or means to, render assistance to, cooperate effectively with, aid or assist. I like this. To provide what is necessary, right, to accomplish a task or satisfy a need. So that being the case, you would have to sort of ask the person what is necessary and needed and wanted, right? Not just assume. Also, these definitions don't state it, but I would argue that help, true help, is given in constructive endeavors. Like if somebody wants to jump off the bridge and you encourage them or push them, an extreme example, but is that really help? Although in the very same Outlander series, the protagonist takes somebody's life who is suffering and who wants to die, so sometimes. But anyway, in most middle ground, golden middle circumstances, you're not going to be asked to make such choice. But when people misunderstand help, they can actually harm or hurt or obstruct, even unintentionally. You get my point, right?